Hey Chaotic Crew, Brian here. We are diving into the Precon season once again for Lorwyn Eclipsed, and got a lot of fun stuff planned here. Before we get too far into the episode, I want to let you know that it's brought to you by Manapool. Manapool is a fast-growing marketplace for Magic the Gathering that makes buying and selling cards easy. Their optimizer helps you get the best value in buying cards, and the team is focused on making it a great experience for buyers and sellers alike. So for this upgrade list that we're doing here, if you want to buy any of the cards that I'm recommending, make sure to check out Manapool and their affiliate link in our description below. Now, if you want a copy of the Blight Curse Precon or the Dance of the Elements Precon from Lorwyn Eclipsed, make sure to comment on the video. Let me know what is your favorite Lorwyn card, period. I think mine has to be the OG Reaper King. Comment on this video. Don't forget to comment on our upcoming Dance of the Elements Precon upgrade video. And subscribe to the channel. Make sure you become a channel member for an extra entry into the giveaway, and we'll be announcing the winners of the giveaways at the end of the month, Friday, January 30th at 9 p.m. on our Twitch stream, twitch.tv/chaoticcommandermtg. Don't miss out, and make sure to get those entries in while you can. But going into this, we're going to take a look at the Precon, the Blight Curse Jund -1/-1 counter Precon that Wizards is coming out with. We're going to take out 15 cards, add in 15 of our own cards, and really just give a review about what the deck wants to do and how it operates. Now, to start with that, we have the two face commanders of the Precon. First one is Anti-Ul, Curse Fetch. 4 mana, 1 in a Jund for a legendary Goblin Warlock, 4/4. Has Ward, Blight 2. So essentially, for your opponents to target this with anything, they need to put 2 -1/-1 counters on a single creature they control. Not the best ward, but also not the worst. Whenever one or more -1/-1 counters are put on a creature, you draw a card if you control that creature, and if you don't control it, its controller loses 1 life. For cards that can put -1/-1 counters on any creature, you kind of get the best pick of the litter there, whether you need card draw or if you want to, weaken an opponent's creature or make them lose life. This is a bit more of a aristocrat strategy, right, where you're not even killing a bunch of your own creatures, you're actually trying to board wipe your opponents all out of the way, and make sure you're dealing as much damage to them as possible. The other commander here, the Reaper King No More, the Reaper King No More. You might remember the 5-color Reaper King, but now I don't know what happened to lose his royalty, but just Jund now, or could technically be a colorless commander, which is really funny. But when he enters, you put a -1/-1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So it could be yours, it could be your opponent's, and then whenever the creature an opponent controls with a -1/-1 counter on it dies, you may put that card on the battlefield under your control. Do this only once each turn. So the Reaper, I think, focuses more on removing your opponent's creatures. Anti-Ul, you get more value off of putting -1/-1 counters on your own creatures, and then some incremental value by putting counters on your opponent's creatures. I think with this deck, you definitely want to go with Anti-Ul Curse Fetch. I think it's built better that way by Wizards, and we're going to upgrade it quickly there. But you could also make a strong deck with the Reaper as well. But yeah, let's dive into the Precon here that Wizards built for us. Obviously, we have the 2 commanders. Sinister Gnarlbark is a new card from the set, and it has at the beginning of your end step, draw a card, and Blight 1. So this is perfect for, Anti-Ul, right? We're wanting to Blight 1 multiple times, right? Or be able to put -1/-1 counters repeatedly on our creatures. Blight 1 is perfect for us. So we draw a card, and then if our commander's out, we get a -1/-1 counter on a creature, and we also Blight another one. So really great there, and draw a card. Dreadtiller, 3 mana, 2/4. When it enters, you put a -1/-1 counter on any creature, and whenever a creature with a -1/-1 counter on it dies, you may put a land card from your hand or graveyard on the battlefield tapped. So this is great here too, especially if you have some of those, fetch lands or sack lands. There's a great way to get a little bit of extra value off of that, and he also deals with -1/-1 counters, so helpful there. Oft-Nabbed Goat, another new card, 2 mana for a 0/5, and it's interesting. The first ability, only your opponents may activate it, so whoever controls this, only your opponents can activate it. Pay 1, draw a card, gain control of this creature, and put a -1/-1 counter on it. And so if your opponent takes control of it, you can also do it, but anyone can only do this as a sorcery. And when it dies, if it had 1 or more -1/-1 counters on it, its owner draws that many cards, and each other player loses that much life. So this will benefit you the most, Bit of a politicsy card. I like it a lot. I think in some pods it's not going to do much, and then some pods it might do a whole lot. You just really don't know. So good. That's something to think about, right? Village Pillagers is also a new card with Wither. It's 5 mana for a 5/5 and Wither, so it deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. When this creature enters, it deals 1 damage to each creature opponents control, which is essentially saying they're all getting a -1/-1 counter. And then whenever a creature opponent controls with a counter on it dies, any counter, not just a -1/-1, you create a tapped treasure token. So you're getting value off of killing your opponent's creatures, and your opponents are going to lose a lot of life if your commander's on the battlefield. It just works really well with what the deck wants to do. Theraphor Young Yu, another new card here, 7 mana for a 4/7 legendary tree folk. When he enters, you create a number of 1/1 green saplings equal to the number of counters among creatures target player controls. So notably, it's the number of counters, not the number of creatures with counters. So could very easily, especially if you're in a counter deck, get a lot of saplings off of this, and then you can also tap him to double the number of each kind of counter on target creature. So a neat card there. Tree of Perdition is a fantastic reprint. Exchange target opponent's life total with this creature's toughness. It starts out as a 0/13, but is a great card to put some of your -1/-1 counters on that you can blight yourself and draw cards off of, and then you're making Tree of Perdition's toughness lower, which makes it even better to switch your opponent's power and toughness. In my experience, Tree of Perdition kind of puts a target on your back. Everyone wants to either remove it or kill you before you get the chance to do it, but it's also kind of a mutually assured destruction, right? If someone tries to kill you, you can, in response, tap this and do a lot of damage to them. So yeah, but something to think about. Necroskitter, 3 mana, probably the best card of the deck. Whenever a creature opponent controls with a -1/-1 counter and it dies, you may return that card to the battlefield under your control. Also has Wither, so it's just a better version of the Reaper King No More, but it's not in your command zone, right? So that's kind of the main thing there. This was the most expensive reprint this deck had going, and a very strong card. Ignoble Hierarch, just a great mana dork for Jund. Massacre Girl, known killer, 4 mana for a 4/4 menace. Gives your creatures Wither, which is great, and then whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, you draw a card. So essentially every time your opponent's creatures are dying because of you, whether it's -1/-1 counters or Wither, then you are drawing cards, which is great. Grave Titan's interesting here. It creates a bunch of bodies for you to put -1/-1 counters on, but really strange to have in the deck, I feel like. Scorpion God is fantastic. Will draw us cards when creatures with -1/-1 counters dies. You can put mana into giving creatures counters, and then it returns to your hand if it dies. So they're strong in general. Carnifex Demon will enter with 2 counters, and then you can pay a black, remove a counter from it to put a -1/-1 counter on each other creature. So really good there too. We'll draw you a bunch of cards, we'll deal a bunch of damage to your opponents with Anti-Ul out, just strong all around. Puppeteer Click is great, 5 mana. Its stats aren't amazing, but you get a creature from an opponent's graveyard when this enters onto your battlefield under your control with haste, and then at the beginning of your next end step you exile it, and it has Persist, so it'll enter in with another -1/-1 counter, draw you a card, and get the effect again when it dies, so pretty neat. Dusk Urchins, when it enters, when it attacks or blocks, you get a -1/-1 counter on it, and when it dies, you draw a card for each -1/-1 counter on it. So there's a lot of draw synergy we're seeing already in this deck, right? Whether it's our commander or other cards that are drawing cards, we do have a good amount just to start with. Midnight Banshee is really neat as well. Beginning of your upkeep, you put a -1/-1 counter on each non-black creature, so pretty strong there. Archfiend of Ifnir, one of the best -1/-1 counter cards, but you kind of have to build around it. You have to cycle or discard other cards to do it, to put those counters on each creature your opponents control, but strong when you can get it off. Channeler Initiate is great. It's a great mana dork. With this deck, you can continuously put -1/-1 counters on it, and very easily able to just get good value off of that. Apatra is great, gives you snakes, and can also itself put -1/-1 counters on creatures, but usually not going to do that. Just a little bit of a token generator here. It's not once per turn, so it helps with combos. You can add stuff to make infinites in this deck, right? Apatra could be a big part of that. Glissa Sunslayer is interesting card to have in here too. Doesn't have anything to do with -1/-1 counters. I guess you could remove 3 -1/-1 counters from a permanent when it deals damage, but I see it as you can remove 2 counters from this and not matter because it has first strike and death touch, right? So you can put your -1/-1 counters here and still have a really great time, and then maybe it can remove them from itself. So honestly, yeah, actually Glissa is pretty neat add here. Grim Poppet enters with 3 counters. You can remove a counter and put one on another creature, so that is also nice as well. Puts it on himself or onto Ul to draw a card, and then can put it on opponents or your other creatures to draw a card or, you know, make your opponents lose life. Skin Render, you enter as you put a 3 on any creature, which is great. Soul Snuffers, when it enters, puts a counter on each creature, even itself, so we'll draw your lots of cards and deal damage to your opponents. Evolution Sage proliferates on landfall, so great to have here. Devoted Druid adds counters to itself to untap it, so if you can find some way to remove those counters or give it +1/+1 counters, that's pretty helpful. Kolrath Knight makes all your creatures your opponent's control not able to block if they have counters on them, any counters. They can't attack or block, so really strong against maybe a +1/+1 counter deck as well. Wickerbow Elder, you know, is a great way to remove artifacts and enchantments. Will enter with a counter, and you can remove counters to do that, so pretty strong there. Artifacts here, we've got Wickersmith's Tools. You can put a charge counter on it whenever -1/-1 counters are put on a creature. Add 1 mana of any color, and then you can also, later in the game, sacrifice it to make a bunch of scarecrows equal to the number of charge counters. So pretty neat mana rock. It's okay. It's not amazing, but it's, you know, could be worse. Camille is interesting here. It just makes your spells not able to be countered, and it'll get you incremental value each turn. Most of the cards in here are below 5 mana, so pretty good with the Discover 5. Soul Ring is also great. Arcane Signet, love that. Contagion Clasp is great as well, putting a -1/-1 counter on any creature. Can also proliferate. Well, who doesn't love that? And then Commander Sphere, not bad. Eventide Shadow is an interesting sorcery. Remove any number of counters from among permanents on the battlefield. You draw cards and you lose life equal to the number of counters removed this way. So typically you're going to want to be doing this to remove the -1/-1 counters on your creatures. And I guess you can remove counters from like opponents' planeswalkers or you know, or their +1/+1 counters, which is pretty strong, right? But I'm probably running this more for the removal aspect rather than the card draw. The card draw, I think, I don't know, depending on the situation, one can be better than the other. But we already have a lot of card draw, don't need a ton more, and it's a 5 mana, so 5 mana card draw needs to be really strong. We're also losing the life, so not ideal either later in the game. I don't know, it's a bit complicated, but I don't hate it. Aberrant Return, another new card, 6 mana. You can put 1, 2, or 3 target creature cards from graveyards on the battlefield under your control, so it could be any graveyard. Each of them enters with an additional -1/-1 counter on it. Black Sun Zenith is a mass board wipe for -1/-1 counters. Painful Truths can draw you cards. Persist returns a non-legendary creature from your graveyard with a -1/-1 counter on it. Great to have. Chain Reaction is a damage-based board wipe. Burning Curiosity is a new card. You can Blight 1 as an additional cost, which is great. You will exile the top 2 cards of your library, and if you pay an additional cost, exile the top 3 instead. Till the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So you have essentially an extra 2 card draw for Blight 1 if your commander's out, so really strong here. I like it a lot. Hoarder's Greed, you can lose 2 life and draw 2 cards, then clash with an opponent. If you win, repeat this process. We don't really have a ton of like high mana value cards in here, so I don't think clashing with opponents is really great in this deck. So most of the time it's going to be 4 mana, lose 2, draw 2, which is not good, right? And even if it's 4 mana, lose 4, draw 4, it's still not amazing. You kind of need to win twice for it to do anything, and that's very unlikely in this deck. Cathartic Reunion, discarding 2 cards to draw 3 cards, not terrible. Incremental Blight, fantastic in the deck, spreading out -1/-1 counters to different creatures. Harmonize can draw you 3 cards, and Night's Whisper is another card draw spell here. As far as enchantments, Grave Venerations is a new one, a 4 mana enchantment that gives you the Monarchy, and then if you're the Monarch at your end step, return up to 1 creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Really solid, especially if you're putting a lot of counters on your own creatures. Then whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So some of that aristocrat-y style, life drain for not bad to have. Puka's Covenant. When a creature you control with a counter on it dies, you may return another permanent with mana value less than or equal to the number of counters on that creature from your graveyard to your hand. Do this only once each turn. This really is only important if you have lots of -1/-1 counters on your own creatures, so not amazing, but not terrible either. Everlasting Torment. All damage is dealt, although its source had Wither, and damage can't be prevented. So this players can't gain life either. It's actually really great against Teferi's Protection, and a good counter to that. Lasting Tarfire is great in the deck. Beginning of each end step, if you put a counter on a creature, this enchantment deals 2 damage to each opponent. This is just another way to sort of burn your opponents, right? This deck doesn't have a lot of ways to win through combat, so we are draining our opponents and doing a lot that way. Blowfly Infestation, if a creature dies, add a -1/-1 counter on it, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. So we're just essentially replacing one of the counters with a creature that's on the board. This is where some of the combos get into play, right? Especially as we get to this next card, Flourishing Defenses. Whenever a -1/-1 counter is put on a creature, you may create a Green 1 Elf Warrior creature token. So this is where it happens. You make the token, right? When you get a -1/-1 counter on a creature, say the elf dies, you can move the -1/-1 counter to another elf. Placing the -1/-1 counter on that elf makes another elf. When that elf dies, you can just continuously drain your opponents, right? So you do have an infinite in the deck already with Grave Venerations, Blowfly Infestation, and Flourish Defenses. Or instead of Flourishing Defenses, Hapatra. So very strong there. You also be careful though, because you will be drawing a card and losing a life yourself if it's your own creatures. So something to keep in mind there. Maybe you start giving this -1/-1 counters to kill it before you do that. And then last enchantment, Binding of the Old Gods, is really great for removal and can get you some of your lands as well. 39 lands, not amazing, nothing crazy here. There's Nesting Grounds, which is great to move counters from your creatures to your opponents. Otherwise, there's Ifnir Deadlands, which has to do with -1/-1 counters. But you have to pay 4 mana and tap this, so essentially 5 mana, and sacrifice it to put 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature. Not really ideal, but it is flavorful, I guess. This deck has 2 Planeswalkers, Vraska, Betrayal Sting, which zeros to draw a card, lose life, and proliferate. Amazing. Can also make a creature a treasure, so removal, that's very unique there. And then can give someone 9 poison counters, which is really strong. Liliana Deathwielder, great here. Can put -1/-1 counters on creatures, can destroy creatures with counters on them, and then can also get you every creature from every graveyard on the battlefield, which is good to have. And then as far as removal, we've got strong ones here with Assassin's Trophy, Fire Covenant, Infernal Grasp, Putrefy, Terminate, and Cathartic Pyre. So all of our instant speed spells are removal here. So this deck does a good job of putting counters on your own creatures and your opponent's creatures, drawing you a bunch of cards, right? I think it does those really well, and it wants to drain your opponents out, right? There are other cards you can add as well to do that. I think it's important that maybe we don't add too many combo pieces in here, just for sake of having fun with our friends, but definitely need to add some more ways to put -1/-1 counters on our creatures. I think there's a lot of targets to do that with, but not a lot of ways to actually do that. Then since we're adding a bunch of counters to our creatures, I want to make sure we're able to counteract that by maybe adding +1/+1 counters to our creatures, or having creatures that don't care even more that they have -1/-1 counters on them. So let's dive into what we're taking out first. And we will go with Archfiend of Ifnir first. And this one is hard. It's hard to take this out because it's one of the best counter cards for this deck, but you have to play around it so well. You have to have a bunch of cards that discard cards, and there's only 6 in the deck that make you discard cards, right? There's 3 lands that have cycling, and then there's Cathartic Reunion and another instant that makes you discard a card. And it's oh, this actually most of the time is never going to put counters on our opponent's cards. So really not great in this deck specifically. If you can build around it, then great, but that requires some significant restructuring. Also taking out Ferrophore. Ferrophore is neat, but 7 mana, you know, to get you a bunch of tokens, and then the turn after maybe double counters on a creature isn't really worth it to me. It's too much mana and does a whole lot of nothing. You really want to build around him to get the most value off of him, and we're just not doing that, right? Especially as putting counters on our opponent's creatures, they end up dying, so all the counters you place don't get to stack up, whereas if you're doing like a +1/+1 counter deck, those creatures typically tend to stay around longer. Grave Titan I took out for all, you know, same reason. It doesn't really gel with the deck and what the deck wants to do. Not amazing to have. Not a terrible card, but just not great. Often Nabbed Goat is a cool card. I think will be played a lot in a lot of pods, but in some pods it's just going to do nothing, right? If all the opponents decide to not steal the goat, it just becomes a creature that you want to put your own -1/-1 counters on, which is okay, but then is not really doing anything while it's on the battlefield, right? So there's something to think about there. Taking out Cathartic Reunion, we don't need this. We already have a lot of card draw. We don't need to discard cards, right? We're taking out Hoarder's Greed. We don't need a Clash, right? Taking out Harmonize. We don't need to draw cards. Taking out Painful Truths. We already have so much card draw with our Commander and the other -1/-1 counter cards in the deck. There's no reason to have this much more, right? And then Chain Reaction is just not a great board wipe as well. Instance, we're taking out Cathartic Pyre. It's not bad to deal 3 damage, but we also don't need to discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards, so you just take it out. And then Puka's Covenant, you know, it's nice to get permanents out of our graveyard into our hand, but most of the time those are going to be creatures, and really don't need to, I don't know, you have to have enough counters on it for it to matter, and I don't think we're going to. I think this is great for +1/+1 counter decks, but not for -1/-1 counter decks, again. And then we're taking out 4 lands. I talked about Ifnir Deadlands and why that's a bad card in here. But also Rakdos Carnarium, Gruul Turf, Golgari Rot Farm, all are not really good in what the deck wants to do. Really, you want to get your commander out early and then start putting counters on your creatures, your opponent's creatures, and kind of go from there. So let's go into what cards we want to put in, right? First off, you know, creatures. We're adding 8 creatures to the deck. Decimator Beetle is really great. 5 mana card. When it enters, you put a -1/-1 counter on your own creature, so draw a card with your commander. Then whenever he attacks, you remove a -1/-1 counter from a creature you control and put a -1/-1 counter to one target creature defending player controls. So this way, it makes it easier for it to get damage in, but it also is doing both, right? It's giving a counter to us and a counter to our opponent. So really great to have in the deck. Generous Patron, a fantastic card for this deck, right? We took out a bunch of our card draw pieces, but we're going to add in a couple more that are more synergistic with our deck, right? Generous Patron is great because whenever you put 1 or more counters on a creature you don't control, you draw a card. And this essentially makes it so that we can have both of these out and not feel bad about putting counters on our opponent's creatures because we know we're going to draw cards anyways. And Generous Patron also supports 2, so it can put +1/+1 counters on 2 other creatures. So it could be an opponent's creature if we want, but typically we might want to use this to counteract some of the -1/-1 creatures we have on our own creatures, right? Because if a +1/+1 counter and a -1/-1 counter get put on the same creature, they cancel out. Loyal Guardian, similarly, is going to be putting +1/+1 counters on all of our creatures. And this is great because when we put the -1/-1 counters on our creatures, right, the +1/+1 counters will cancel them out. So we can continue to keep putting more and more +1/+1 counters or -1/-1 counters on them. It's just fantastic to have. Persistent Constrictor is also an amazing add here. We're going to get a -1/-1 counter on each of our opponents, on one of our opponent's creatures during each of their upkeeps, and they will lose 1 life. So it's draining them like we want, and it is giving counters. So perfect for what the deck wants. This also has Persist, so when it dies, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter. Just really great altogether with what the deck wants. A new card from the set, Lorwyn Eclipsed, Scuzzback Scrounger. Beginning of your first main phase, you may Blight 1 if you do create a treasure token. Now you can Blight 1, you also don't have to. I think something this deck struggles with is getting our commander out a turn early, right? We want these turn 2 ramp spells or mana rocks or whatever you can to be able to get your commander out of turn early. Scuzzbag Scrounger can do that if you need it to, but also is fantastic to have with your commander out. Because if you're putting, you're literally going to have a repeatable way to put a -1/-1 counter on your creature each turn. So great there. Spitting Dilophosaurus, I know is very expensive, but just proxy this card. This card is really great. When it enters or attacks, you get a -1/-1 counter up to 1 target creature, and then creatures your opponent's control with -1/-1 counters can't block. So another way to kind of end the game, late game, right? If you can play this and your opponents have a bunch of counters on them, this is great. You can just get in with your creatures, but also just a great way to put -1/-1 counters on yours or your opponent's creatures. Vorapede, I think, is a neat add in here. It has Undying, and there's a couple cards I thought about adding with Undying, but I think Vorapede is the best. It's a 5/4 Vigilance Trample, and so when it dies, it comes back with a +1/+1 counter on it if it didn't have any to begin with. And so it's a great card that when it comes back, then you can end up putting a -1/-1 counter on it somehow to get rid of that +1/+1 counter, so that when it dies again, it'll just come back again. So this is a great, card that can apply pressure to opponents or be a good blocker, sack outlet, whatever you want for it. The Vorapede can do that and can just keep coming back. So really strong there. And then Yawgmoth Ramp Physician is the last creature I wanted to add in. Pro humans doesn't really matter a whole lot, but you can pay 1 life, sack a creature to give a -1/-1 counter up to 1 target creature and draw a card. We have a couple, token generators in the deck. Right? We did take out the Ferrophore, but we did add in, we still have Hapatra, we still have that other 5-mana elf enchantment. Really strong there. And then you can also proliferate with Yawgmoth too, so really, really good in the deck. Sorceries, I'm adding Nature's Lore in 3 visits. This deck adds in different forest, like dual lands in the deck. So 3 visits and Nature's Lore both get cards out that can help us cast our commander early, which is great. We took out 4 lands, so I'm adding in 1 more with Malakir Rebirth to continue to, if a creature I control dies, maybe our commander or a creature with -1/-1 counters dies, we can Malakir Rebirth it and have it come back immediately. Same with Undying Evil, same kind of idea with Vorapede, right? Give a creature that's dying with -1/-1 counters Undying Evil, it'll come back. So really cool there to have. Contagion Engine, you'll probably see this on most lists to add into the deck. It'll give a -1/-1 counter on each creature target player controls. So really strong here against specific players that you need to stop their tokens or are just like too much to handle. And then you can use this to proliferate and proliferate again. So really strong here. And then lastly, another way to get tokens, Nest of Scarabs, is going to give us 1/1 insects whenever we get -1/-1 counters on a creature. So another great way to synergize with Yawgmoth as well. So lots of really strong combos in here. This deck is really good at controlling the board, drawing a bunch of cards, and sort of winning through that through attrition. So maybe not as fun for your opponents to play against. I think the other commander, Reaper King, may also be frustrating just because he's going to be stealing a lot of your opponent's stuff. So something to think about if you play this deck. But otherwise, super fun, and I hope you enjoy the build. Remember, if you want your own version of the Blight Curse Precon, make sure to comment on this video as far as who is your favorite Lorwyn card, right? It can be any card from any of the Lowryn sets. I just want to know what your favorite Lowryn card is. Mine probably has to be the original Reaper King, just such a cool, unique card, and a really great way to introduce the players into these hybrid mana symbols. There's a lot of fun things there, but yeah, that's probably my favorite one. But what's yours? Let me know in the comment down below. But yeah, don't forget to do that, or make sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll be giving away both this and the Elemental Precon at the end of the month, January 30th. That's a Friday at 9 p.m. Central on our Twitch stream, twitch.tv/chaoticCommanderMTG. So set your alarms, your calendars for that, and make sure to tune in to see who wins. Otherwise, hope you had a great time, and I'll be back next week with the next Precon. Take care. Bye.